Alhamdulillah, salatu salam ala Sayyidi ya Rasulullah. This is Mujib Qazi, and you're watching Washington Roundtable on Voice of Kashmir TV. Kashmir at a crossroad, that is the topic that we have chosen for today's discussion, and I'm joined by Vice President of Kashmir Global Council, Mufti Shaukat Farooki Sahab. Farooki Sahab, welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
Thank you very much. Kashmiris have lost an iconic figure. Uh, Unfortunately, if we see for the last few years, we have seen actually almost all the Kashmiri leaders are either house arrest or they are passing away one by one due to not being able to receive adequate health treatment, who are under house arrest or they are in the jail or whatever the case may be. Syed Ali Gilani Sahib was one of the symbol of freedom in the freedom movement and was dedicated 60 years of his life for the cause. And we have lost him. He was under house arrest for the last 12 years, and obviously it's a huge loss for the people of Kashmir, for the movement of Kashmir. And I would like to see your reaction to that.
Uh, yeah, you said it right. Gilani Saab was a very tall leader for the last 40 to 60 years. And what distinguished him from others was his commitment to his ideals and commitment to the goal that he had set out early on in his life, along with his organization and his uh, political associates. And that was the resolution of the Kashmir dispute in accordance with the wishes of the Kashmiri people. And he struggled for that goal all his life. And for the last 12 years, as you rightly said, he was under house arrest, and he was put under the most draconian and harsh conditions. The police was in outside his house almost all the time. His movements were monitored. Anyone who visited him, they were monitored, and it was a very difficult situation. He was not even allowed to go to the mosque, pray Jummah prayers, or go outside his house to do anything at all. And that is by itself a traumatic experience that any human being can be put through. It was cruel, and it was the worst kind of human rights violations that could be inflicted on anyone. But he did not surrender. That is one thing that we must acknowledge. He did not surrender. He did not compromise on his principles. He did not compromise on his political goals. He did not compromise on the rights of the Kashmiri people, and he stood tall and unique among all the political leaders in Kashmir. In that respect, that he refused to compromise on principles, not only with India, but also with Pakistan. He opposed Pakistan, General Musharraf's plan, and he was alone a voice to oppose that plan from the Kashmiri uh, leadership, and he did receive some pushback from Pakistan with regard to that. But his commitment to his ideals, to his goal, to the Kashmiri people, remained steadfast and unwavering until he breathed breathed his last breath. So that is rare in today's world, and we must salute. I salute. I personally salute him for showing that commitment, that courage, that character, and we are proud of him, of his life, of his struggle and he the way the way he lived his life up to the very last.
That's a beautiful way of paying him tribute towards a very tall leader. He has various dimensions of his personality. He would say what his mind would tell him to do, whether it's the powers of India or Pakistan. He will speak his mind, and then what we see is a leader who was living in the hearts and the minds of the people, millions of people in Kashmir, inside Kashmir and outside. But he was not given a due respect when he died. He was not allowed, his family was not allowed to have a funeral ritual that was his due right as Muslim, as citizen, as leader. And I have seen your post on the Twitter account as well as on the Facebook that you were very upset because he was not given the right farewell while he was being buried. Your comments on that, and then we'll move on to the human rights violation in Kashmir.
Yes, it is very upsetting that a leader of his stature was was shown so much disrespect and disregard, even in the final moments of his life, and it was I think it was uh, an act of cowardice on behalf of India, because they feared that that because they feared that people would join in large numbers in his funeral. They would come out, they would join in large numbers in his funeral, because he was a leader of that stature, of that popularity in Kashmir. So they did not want to do that. And secondly, it is their cruelty and their meanness, to say the least, that they wanted to show Kashmiris that we can disrespect the tallest of the Kashmiri leaders in this way. But it's a sign of desperation. It is a sign of desperation, like all other draconian measures that they are taking in Kashmir, and it is in my opinion, counterproductive to India, because they are not winning any friends in Kashmir, not among the Kashmiris, definitely, but even among their own supporters, like the pro India politicians. Even in the national parties of India, they are not winning any supporters in that. And there were many leaders in India who expressed their resentment and their sense of outrage and disgust for disrespecting a leader of Gilani Saab in his last moments. I may say also say that not only living people have human rights, even a body has human rights, and that is to be treated with respect. And India failed in that commitment, because they don't really care. They don't care. They have shown utter disregard for the rights of Kashmiri people, and have and have inflicted uh, horrendous human rights violations on them.
Mufti Saab, human rights is a very broad subject, and we definitely need to discuss that. But uh, we have seen Gilani Saab have stepped aside from the lead role in the Hurriyat conference. And I personally am convinced that you can bring the change when you are within the system and change come within. How do you regard that decision when he stepped aside and nominated Sehrai Saab to lead the organization during his lifetime? Would you agree with his decision, or would you just advise him otherwise?
Well, while we love and respect Gilani Sahib, but ultimately he will be judged by history, and and we have to take a dispassionate view of his political life, his political decisions. Of course, we have the hindsight, the 2020, hindsight, and we didn't have the to take those decisions while he was carrying forward his political fight. But political leaders when they take those decisions, those are analyzed for what they are worth. So I think that I think that the move to withdraw from, to leave Hurriyat conference, for whatever reasons, for political or personal reasons, was not a was not a good move by Gulani Saab, because for the obvious reason that it divided the Hurriyat conference, and it confused the Kashmiri people. They wanted, it was against their wishes. I think it was a move that was not welcomed by Kashmiris in general, because they didn't want their leadership to be divided at a time when they were ordinary Kashmiris all over Jammu and Kashmir were giving tremendous sacrifices. People were uh, being subjected to tremendous pressure and human rights violations by the Indian security forces and the army. Uh, that was not a move that should have been taken. In fact, they should have worked for unity, and I don't think there were any ideological differences within the Hurriyat conference. It was not for ideological reasons, because everybody in all the political parties constituting Hurriyat conference were working for the same objective, that was resolution of the Kashmir issue. And why that split happened, I don't really understand, but it was not a good move. And I agree with you that if there were differences, he should have stayed within the Hurriyat conference, and made it and discussed those differences with his colleagues, and after discussion, debate, disagreements, they could have reached a consensus. But leaving is not a good strategy, because by being inside that organization, he could have helped engineer a change. He could have helped the Hurriyat conference to come to a common to a common strategy. But by leaving, what happened was that the leadership weakened, and the people were really disappointed by that move. So that is one thing, that the Kashmiris did not like.
So we agree that differences do happen in the leadership, but the leaders should stay within the organization and sort things out, because the objective and the mission of the organization and the cause is much bigger than their own uh, personal liking and disliking per se. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on his grave and accept all of his efforts. Coming back to human rights violation in Kashmir, India has committed grave human rights violation, and there were two reports by the UN, United Nations Human Rights Commissions, that have held India responsible for those violations. In spite of that, currently India is serving as president of the United Nations General Assembly. How do you see that? Is India, with all those grave human rights violation, is exempt from the human rights violation, or what's happening on the surface here?
I'm happy that you referred to the human rights violations. There are two reports. recent reports. One is came out in on 14 June 2018, and the other report is in 2019, July 2019. And those reports are by the United Nations Committee on Human Rights. Uh, those are comprehensive reports, independent reports, where they have collected a lot of evidence, documents, and then talked to people on both sides of the Kashmir. They went to Azad Kashmir, they went to the Indian occupied Kashmir, and they talked to people in whichever way they could. And they came up with a comprehensive report of gross human rights violations in Kashmir and made some recommendations. Uh, and they also gave India an opportunity to present its viewpoint during that investigation. But as usual, India did not cooperate with that, and they did not give them free access to visit the valley. And when the report finally came, and it was sent to the Indian government for its comments, they dismissed it as not being true. Now, this was not a report by a partisan committee, like someone in Kashmir making a report, someone in Pakistan making a report, or somewhere else making a report. This was a report by a respected and highly regarded organization or entity of the United Nations. And it should have been acted upon. So, what should usually happen is that the country which is guilty of such widespread human rights violations should be sanctioned. There should be sanctions, not by the United Nations, by the countries which are part of the United Nations, uh, notably uh, United States, Britain, France, Germany, all the major uh, countries, Western countries in the world. But that did not happen. And the reason that did not happen is because of economic reasons. They have economic interests in India. They see it as a global market to expand their businesses, and they don't see it as in their economic and national interest to to hold India responsible, accountable for its human rights violations. In fact, what were their motivations? I'm speculating, but nothing happened on those reports. As you said, that on the other hand, India was recently rewarded with the presidentship of the United Nations United Nations Security Council, and it was presiding over sessions which were critical of human rights violations around the world in other parts of the country, notably recently in Afghanistan, for their treatment of women and people who have political differences with them. And India was presiding. I mean, what greater slap? What greater slap could be inflicted on people around the world who are suffering human rights violations than to allow India to preside over the Security Council when there are two reports by the United Nations detailing widespread human rights violations in Kashmir. It was an insult to international law. It was an insult to rule of law. It was an insult to decency, to decent people around the world. And it was an insult to human rights campaigners anywhere in the world to allow India to be on the as the president of the United Nations Security Council and preside over sessions which were debating human rights violations around the world. So,
That's go ahead. You go
and
ahead.
and it is the and we as Kashmiri diaspora, as human rights campaigners, as Kashmiris in Jammu and Kashmir, we are entitled to ask the world community and these, especially the countries that are influential in the Security Council, to we are entitled to ask them, why did they allow this atrocity to happen? Why was this allowed to happen? And how long are they going to ignore India's dismal record of human rights violations in Kashmir? How long are they going to allow Kashmiris to suffer at the hands of Indian security forces and their institutions? Because now it's not only the security forces; they are using every arm of the Indian administrative setup to silence Kashmiris, to make them prisoners in their own houses. Kashmir is an open prison where people of Kashmir enjoy no rights. If you see the social media, if you see the social media and you see the comments, people don't express any view on happenings in Kashmir now. Why is that happening? Because they are immediately targeted, social media is monitored, and they are arrested. They are involved in false cases, especially the draconian anti-terrorism laws. They are using the the NIA, and the police forces to silence Kashmiris. Look at what is happening with the newspapers in Kashmir. They have become reporters of the government totally. They don't report anything about the human rights violations in Kashmir. They don't report anything about how people in Kashmir are suffering at the hands of the Indian government and their institutions.
Mufti Sir, you have eloquently elaborated on the double standard of United Nations and human rights violation taking place in Kashmir by the Indian forces. And you have also alluded slightly what happened in Afghanistan, and then India were to preside the sessions. Uh, do you think Afghanistan, the fall of Afghanistan, has any implication for Kashmiri cause, in your point of view? Briefly, if you can want to shed a light on this one, because a lot of people are speculating. Because if you watch the Indian TV channels, it's a day and night. There's a orchestrated, organized propaganda that now Taliban has taken over Afghanistan. Their next target is they will bring in the insurgency in Kashmir. Is that what Kashmiris view, that they're part of the Indian propaganda to undermine this Kashmiri struggle, which is peaceful, rightful, and has a basic right of Kashmiris to raise their voices and fight on every platform and forum for their independence, so that the Indian this orchestrated campaign on the media can undermine the struggle to begin with. What is your view on that?
Well, first of all, uh, the Afghan government, has, or their functionaries have clearly stated that they will not allow their country to be used against any other country around Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Russia, China, any country. So they have clearly said that, and not only those countries, but all countries. They have said they will not allow their country to be used for any kind of violence or terrorist activities in other countries.
So
That
that
is
is that should just shut the case right there because
Exactly. That should shut the case. And secondly, uh, uh, I don't see how it helps. Why Afghans would be interested in in starting an insurgency in Kashmir. There are no Afghans in Kashmir. They have no interest in Kashmir to defend, and why should they spend their resources and their manpower in Kashmir and earn the condemnation of the entire world.
so why do you think the India is propagating it?
The Indians are smarting under the loss of their influence in Afghanistan,
So that's where the thing.
because they were using Afghanistan to foment trouble in neighboring countries, especially Pakistan.
Correct.
And that's not something that India can deny.
Of course.
There's ample
Evidence.
evidence to show that they were doing. And after the takeover of Taliban in Afghanistan, in fact, the security situation in Pakistan has improved. You can see that. I mean, there has been a decrease in in violence that was emanating from Afghanistan through Indian agents, who they were arming and financing to foment trouble in Pakistan. So India is hurt. You can see that in their
Yeah.
report.
Correct.
They see as a tragedy what has happened in Pakistan, in
Uh,
Afghanistan.
Mufti sir, last question. We are running out of time. How concerned are you about the leaders who are in prison in Kashmir, who are not being given the rights of counsel, rights of medical treatment, and pretty much entire leadership is in jail, and especially with this COVID spreading like a wildfire, and we don't even know whether or not their inmates are being tested or they're being kept separately. Uh, just last 3 minutes, if you could, please.
I have visited a lot of jails in India while I was there in the 90s, because they moved a lot of detainees from Kashmiri detainees to other parts of India, far off places in UP and throughout India. So I had a chance to visit those places, because I was as a member of the Kashmir Bar Association, and I visited along with my friends and colleagues on behalf of the bar association various many prisons, and they were in bad shape at that time. They were not given right to counsel. They were not given medical facilities. Rarely, they were not given, given proper food, and they were treated really in a very bad way. And some of these places which were in the summer zone, like UP and central India, where gets very hot during summer, they didn't even have fans. They did not have proper facilities. Now, but the situation has only got worse with the BJP government coming into power, and I really I'm really concerned, really concerned about the condition of Kashmiri detainees in Indian jails, and look at how they are treating people like Yasin Malik, people who are the face of Kashmiri struggle for freedom. Not to speak of the second level or third level, leaders. They are treated really harshly, and it is the bounden duty of international legal authorities to to visit those jails, especially in International Red Cross, to visit those jails and look for themselves what is happening to to detainees, Kashmiri detainees in those jails. Uh,
Thank you. I'm running out of time. We will have to invite you back to discuss more on this one. I really appreciate giving us the time, but we are running out of time. We'll have